Hello and welcome to World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw, Poland. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Good evening. Water cannons, pepper sprays and tear gas again in Georgia capital of Tbilisi, where the police cracked down on masked young protesters angry over the government's decision to suspend the country's EU bid until 2028. Yet another clash, but this one involving unprecedented brutality. Hope remains, but is Georgia heading for a dead corner? We'll have more on that in just a moment, right after the headlines. Mystery on the Baltic seabed. Who's to blame for severing the undersea communication cables? China denies involvement but is willing to cooperate. Germans patriots to guard Polish skies again. Rzeszów Airport will receive the anti-missile system in the coming weeks. And Iga Świątek has been suspended for 1 month. The Polish tennis champion accepted the Tennis Integrity Agency's decision after testing positive for a banned substance. Broken limbs, concussions. Protesters in Tbilisi, Georgia, led by President Salome Zurabishvili, were met with extreme force used by the police last night. The unprecedented level of brutality raises question as to the reason for such an escalation by the authorities, who officially stopped the EU accession process until 2028. Franciszek Pils has more.
For Georgians who still cling on to hope of EU integration, the Georgian dream is quickly turning into the Georgian nightmare.
This is so disrespectful to our culture, to our people, for everyone around us.
Georgians who fought for years to defeat Russians, and now what is happening?
To become independent. Like, we've done so much to become who we are today.
As of now, Tbilisi has halted its EU accession process, a decision unveiled by the Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze, which goes against the Georgian constitutional promise of EU integration.
Today, we decided not to put the issue of opening negotiations with the EU on the agenda until the end of 2028. We also refuse any budgetary grants from the EU until the end of 2028.
While the decision might seem like a radical move, Kobakidze's statement came after the European Parliament already called for a rerun of the most recent parliamentary elections, which saw the Georgian dream win, citing election fraud and numerous irregularities reported by international observers. Following this statement, the EU blocked Georgia's accession process and access to EU funds prior to Tbilisi's response.
The EU has been saying that, we are stopping cooperation until you do this and that. But it's one thing when the EU says it, and it's another when Georgian Dream openly declares that, we don't care. Like, you're not going to be used as a threat to us anymore. Like, basically, what they're trying to say to the Georgian public is that we are no longer going to be threatened by the EU.
The incumbent government's answer to the wave of protests was dispatching the police, which took to fighting off the demonstrators. According to reports from Tbilisi, among those who were injured by the police are Radio Free Europe and Formula News journalists, rumored to have become victims of unprompted and deliberate attacks carried out by the authorities. Many others, including activists and opposition figures, have also been injured in the protests, including Elena Kostaria, an opposition MP who refused her mandate in protest of the election results. The police have also entered the headquarters of the opposition Coalition for Change party, chasing after fleeing protesters.
Since the state is captured by a Russian oligarch in Georgia, of course the police is abusing power and it's treating people in a very violent way, but it has not influenced our choice to fight for freedom. Moreover, people are more motivated, more committed to fight, and we are seeing more and more people in the streets. So the police violence cannot stop Georgian people's strive for European future.
According to statements from opposition figures, including Ekaterina Kopalishvili of Tabula Media and Elena Kostaria, the protests are not going to stop anytime soon, as EU hopeful Georgians will not rest until a new election is held.
And more on the possible scenarios ahead of Georgia will be joined by our guests right after the news. To Romania now, where Romanians will vote in parliamentary elections this Sunday. The vote follows the first round of presidential elections held last weekend, which was surprisingly won by a pro-Russian independent candidate, Calin Georgescu. As these votes are being contested and might even be nullified, nothing can be taken for granted when it comes to the results of the general election. Our correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski is on site in Romania and has more on the ensuing political conundrum in the country. Paweł, good evening. Tell us, what do we know at this point?
Well, at this point, what we know for certain is that there is a recount of the votes cast during the first round of presidential elections. And let me remind you that the first round was won by controversial Calin Georgescu, anti-NATO, pro-Putin independent candidate. And he won mainly because of a very successful TikTok campaign. And this TikTok campaign was marred with irregularities to the point that the investigation and the recount of the votes had to be introduced. Now, we actually had a talk on this earlier today in TVP World. Have a listen.
TikTok refused to take any responsibility for the incredible number of alternative profiles this individual had. He had more than 100 with various denominations that were active and that were basically flooding the newsfeed of any TikToker in Romania with messages about Georgescu, about vote Georgescu. All these largely were unmarked as electoral messages, because normally they should have been marked. And it was only with a late reaction that TikTok admitted to take them down. They did so, but only a couple. So you can imagine the massive amount of propaganda was still there.
Now, the results of the recount should be known on Sunday, and the eventual decision to nullify the vote will be made on Monday. Now, Sunday is the day of the general election. So now let's take to the polls. Now, the polls say that in the general elections, the far right Our Party takes the lead with 22%. Our Party is the former party of Calin Georgescu, the winner of the first round of presidential elections. But he left the party because his colleagues said he was too extreme for the party. Still, this is the hard right choice for the Romanians, and it is followed by the Social Democrats, who are now a part of the ruling coalition. But there is a lot of uncertainty looming over Romania, and it is being felt in the society. We also actually had a conversation, a talk on it today in TVP World. Please have a listen.
The mood is really grim in the Romanian society right now. So on the one hand, you have the supporters of Calin Georgescu and the liberal parties who feel that the main political parties, hand in hands with their proxies in the Constitutional Court, are trying to steal their vote. And on the other hand, you have the rest of the population who feels that this is an attempt against democracy.
So all in all, we are looking towards pivotal elections, and Romanians will be presented with at least two choices. One choice will be to veer hard to the right, like many other European countries already did, or stay on the social, democratic, liberal path. Whatever the choice they will make over the next few days, we will be covering these events. But for today, this is it. Back to the studio.
Thank you very much. This is Paweł Trzaskowski from pouring rain in Bucharest. Thank you very much, Paweł. China is ready to assist the investigation into the damage of two underwater cables in the Baltic Sea. A Chinese ship, now surrounded by European warships off the coast of Denmark, reportedly dragged its anchor some 100 miles, damaging the cables.
Both cables allegedly severed by the Chinese ship Yipeng 3 have been repaired. The investigation continues, but without Chinese help, it may not be possible to establish how and why the damage occurred.
China is willing to work with relevant countries to find out the truth. Currently, China and Sweden are maintaining close communication on this issue.
The two telecommunications links were damaged on November 17th and 18th. One of the severed fiber optic cables connects Germany and Finland. The other links Sweden and Lithuania. But it's not Beijing that experts see as the most likely perpetrator here. For many experts, Russia seems a more probable suspect.
I don't believe in coincidences when it comes to that particular country.
According to reports, the investigation's main task is to now determine whether the Yipeng 3's crew was induced by Russian intelligence to damage the cables and why.
Every single one of these incidents that happen, that occur, they're looking at how a specific country responds.
And how NATO responds is a key question. The Prime Minister of Lithuania believes that if the attacks on the infrastructure prove to be acts of hybrid warfare, EU and NATO allies must respond firmly by applying restrictive measures.
The general response is encapsulated in the NATO principles, so deterrence and defense. And with this, I also would like to stress that I believe that we should look a little bit beyond NATO as well.
If we are not active, if we are not proactive, yes, this is an oxygen for Putin's activities, and they are only escalating the situation. So avoiding escalation by doing nothing is the wrong way.
The recent escalations and the recent combative rhetoric from officials may be worrying to the public, but war studies expert Frank Ledviga reassures the level of hybrid warfare is fairly low at the moment.
Hybrid warfare, of course, is cross-domain activity. It's not necessarily low-level conflicts such as cyber or financial actions or low-level sabotage such as we're seeing now. A hybrid warfare can stretch all the way up to war at the more intense spectrum.
It seems highly improbable that this ship could drag an anchor accidentally for over 100 miles without the crew noticing it. Whether the Yipeng 3 mystery can be solved is up to the investigators. So far, though, in similar incidents, it wasn't possible to point the finger directly at someone.
That was Ovidiusz Nicea reporting. A friendly warning or ambiguous message. Vladimir Putin has warned US President-elect Donald Trump that he's still not safe from assassination attempts, even after winning the election. In the same breath, Putin also said that Moscow is ready to sit at the negotiation table with the incoming Trump administration to discuss peace resolutions for the war in Ukraine.
As the world's eyes focus on the incoming US president, last seen at his Mar-a-Lago residence celebrating Thanksgiving with Elon Musk and family, some world leaders who have been at odds with the Joe Biden administration have spoken out in favor of President-elect Donald Trump. One such leader is Russian President Vladimir Putin, who shared a heartfelt warning with the future 47th President of the United States.
I was most struck by the use of absolutely uncivilized means of struggle that were used against Trump, including attempted murder, and more than once. By the way, in my opinion, he's not safe now either. Unfortunately, there have been all sorts of different incidents in the history of the United States. But I think that he is an intelligent person, and I hope also cautious now, and that he understands all of this.
Concern isn't the only thing the Russian president showed during his address to Donald Trump. Despite his recent political bouts with Washington over Joe Biden granting Kyiv permission to strike targets deep inside Russian territory with US-made weapons, Putin said he's ready to negotiate, especially with the next inhabitant of the White House.
He's absolutely out to flatter Trump in the hopes that it gets Putin what he wants. Now, you've got two issues here. The first one is how Trump looks at this. The second one is how Putin is looking at this. Putin is hoping that those two align, but I'm not so sure. I think for Putin, negotiations means capitulation, that he gets everything that he wants. And it remains to be seen whether or not Trump is willing to cave into that.
Experts like Diane Francis, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, say Trump's efforts to reach peace in Ukraine are nothing more than a business deal given Ukraine's vast reserves of resources.
Ukraine, and Crimea in particular offshore, has enough fossil fuel to make Europe energy independent. So there's a lot at stake here for Russia in the future. in terms of economics. So this, to me, is turning into, and this is how you have to deal with the Trump. It has to be framed as a business deal.
Experts also say the increased ferocity of fighting in Ukraine is tied to Donald Trump's ceasefire promises, as both Kiev and Moscow battle for more bargaining chips to bring to the negotiating table.
German Patriot batteries are returning to Poland. The German and Polish defense ministers have confirmed that the system would guard the Rzeszów airport, an important hub for supplies headed to Ukraine. Germany previously deployed the US-made anti-missile system to Poland between January and November 2023. Warsaw and Berlin are tightening defense cooperation. Marek Stil reports.
In less than 2 months, German Patriot batteries will become operational on Polish soil. Warsaw has welcomed this offer put forward by Germany.
Just now, I spoke with the Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, and I personally thanked him for his commitment and support to the security of Poland and the eastern flank of NATO.
The Patriot system is among the most modern in the world. It is used to combat enemy aircraft, ballistic and cruise missiles.
The Patriot system is absolutely crucial in securing the capability to successfully defend from a foreign attack.
The batteries will guard a crucial hub in southeastern Poland. Rzeszów is not only important to Poland's defenses, it's of central importance for the supply of Western weapons to Ukraine.
We are securing the supply of vehicles, weapons and ammunition that Ukraine urgently needs to defend itself against the brutal Russian attacks, which violate international law. Together with our Polish friends, we are also securing the NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization airspace.
German Patriot systems were already present in Poland from January to November 2023. During that time, more than 300 Bundeswehr servicemen operated 3 Patriot systems on the Polish-Ukrainian border. They were deployed to protect the country's airspace after a lost missile hit the Polish village of Przewodów, killing 2 people in 2022.
Do we need them? Yes. Will they secure Poland's airspace on the high-risk level? No. It's no coincidence that we are ordering, as far as I recall, 48 such launchers within the Wisła program.
Warsaw has 2 of its own Patriot systems, and the US has deployed 1 system to the country. The redeployment of German batteries to Poland was discussed on Thursday between the Chief of Staff of the Polish Armed Forces and Inspector General of the German Bundeswehr.
The generals also discussed preparations for the redeployment of Patriot air defense systems in Poland, the engagement of the Polish and German armed forces in the process of training Ukrainian soldiers, and the development of deterrence and defense capabilities on NATO's eastern flank.
Poland and Germany have been tightening defense cooperation in recent months. This week, they launched a new format along with Italy, France, and the United Kingdom.
I think the fact that we've come together as the E5 very clearly signals that we will stand unified and ready to protect our continent from aggressors. We will stand firm in the face of Putin's threats, and that together we will be ready to deter any expansion of Russian aggression.
Poland and NATO's eastern flank's defenses have also been recently reinforced with a new US missile defense base in northern Poland. The base is capable of intercepting intercontinental ballistic missiles.
And finally, surprising leave for Iga Świątek, rather forced than expected and definitely non-negotiable. The world-renowned Polish tennis player has accepted a 1-month suspension imposed by the International Tennis Integrity Agency after testing positive for a banned substance. Świątek describing this as the hardest moment in her career, explaining that the positive test was a result of taking contaminated prescribed melatonin tablets. While her fans are eagerly awaiting her return, and despite the support she received from the sporting community, the brief duration of her suspension has sparked criticism from other tennis players who have previously faced longer bans.
Świątek, who is among the most successful female tennis players in the world, revealed on Thursday that trimetazidine was discovered in her tests. The banned substance can enhance endurance and delay fatigue.
The detected concentration, which was extremely low, suggested, or rather made it obvious, that either the sample was contaminated or a supplement or medication that I was taking was contaminated, which is why we focused on running tests on all nutritional supplements and medications I was taking.
Świątek's team proved that the banned substance entered her body via contaminated melatonin, and she was allowed to return after a 1-month ban.
The ITIA accepts that the positive test was caused by contamination by a regulated non-prescription medication, melatonin, manufactured and sold in Poland, that the player had been taking for jet lag and sleep issues, and that the violation was therefore not intentional.
The length of the ban did not go unnoticed. Former Grand Slam champion Simona Halep criticized the big difference in treatment when she suffered an 18-month suspension. Small amounts of anemia drug commonly used by cyclists to enhance endurance were found in her system due to a contaminated licensed supplement.
No two cases are the same. They often involve different circumstances, and different comparisons are not always helpful. There are some very important differences in these two cases. The product contaminated in Świątek's case was a regulated medication, not a supplement.
Medications are tightly regulated for safety and effectiveness, while supplements have less oversight, making them more prone to contamination risks. Despite the criticism, Świątek mainly received support from her fans and the sports community at large.
The Polish Tennis Association fully supports Iga Świątek in this difficult moment of her career, knowing how important the principles of fair competition in the spirit of fair play have always been to her. It is also worth appreciating that she had the courage to inform the public in such a transparent and detailed way about the situation.
While fans are eager to see Świątek back in action, the controversy surrounding her brief suspension and Halep's extended ban continues to fuel discussions about the fairness in tennis.
Coming back now to our top topic, Quo Vadis Georgia? Has the Georgian dream become a Georgian nightmare, having ignored the declared will of the majority of Georgians to progress towards Europe? Violent clashes took place last night and the opposition remains hopeful. But the question, is Georgia in a deadlock? Absolutely relevant. Joining me now to discuss Georgian fate is Alexander Crevaux-Asatiani, Deputy Director for Foreign Affairs, United National Movement, an opposition Coalition for Change member as well. Good evening, sir. Happy to have you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for covering this.
Just a quick information. We are going to show pictures on live coming from Georgia as it happens. But we, of course, trying to sketch a possible scenario for your country. Georgia goes through a coup d'etat. These are your words. So please give us an outline of the situation today and of the mood among the opposition leaders.
Okay, so yes, as we speak right now, the law enforcement, the special forces, which by the way are under US sanctions, have launched an assault on the main protest site. We're talking about gas being thrown at the protesters and water cannons being deployed. This is happening right now. I just came from the protest site. So what happened is that on October 26th, the opposition won the election, but the Central Election Commission published different results. This is something that it's a fact. It's a fact that's been recognized by the opposition, by the president of Georgia, by civil society, and by most of the international community. So the current regime, led by Russian oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili, has taken over the government illegally, unconstitutionally, and with the support of an armed police. Yesterday, the same illegal, unconstitutional government, and it's extremely important that, because words do matter, we do not call this a government. It is a de facto government, or self-proclaimed government, but not a government. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, that self-proclaimed government declared an end to Georgia's European integration, a path that it took more than 20 years ago, a path that is supported by 80 to 90% of the Georgian population, and a path that for Georgia is a question of life or death, because without Europe, all we have is Russia and death and poverty and destruction. That is the side that this illegitimate government has taken. So obviously people weren't going to let that happen, and we're not going to let that happen. This is, in the words of a former foreign minister that I was speaking to right before doing this interview, this is the last episode of the series. This is do or die at this point for us.
All right, you speak of a self-proclaimed government. So speaking of it, I know that there's a constitutional lawsuit questioning the legitimacy of this election. So what can be the outcome of it? I mean, what can the Constitutional Court decide?
The Constitutional Court is already taken over by the self-proclaimed government. The judges have mostly disappeared. Actually, a couple hours ago, 15 staffers of the Constitutional Court, we're talking about clerks that staff the court, came out publicly and said that they did not recognize themselves the legitimacy of this government, and they oppose this self-proclaimed government. And the judges themselves have basically disappeared from the public eye. And it's likely that they're being pressured or bought or various ways to force them to rule against our constitutional lawsuit. Our hopes are not with that constitutional lawsuit at this point.
All right.
Our hope is with what's going on in the streets right now. That's our last hope, and also with the international community.
Exactly, the international community. Well, the European Union's ambassador to Georgia, in his first comments from Brussels, deplored the decision taken by the government to halt the EU bid, and he said, his words, regrettable and heartbreaking. Indeed, it is heartbreaking when we listen to young girls in the streets, you know, whose future is being decided somewhere. And do you think that this hope that you have, I mean, the hope on the side of the opposition, is legitimate? I mean, how can end this deadlock? You know, you yourself speak about a possibility of being pressured as well, or delegalized. So do you expect something more brutal to happen, or do you expect some sort of, I don't know, negotiations with the government after all?
Negotiations with an illegitimate regime after they engaged in a coup would not really work. If any negotiation were to happen, it would be about which plane ticket we would buy Bidzina Ivanishvili on his way back to Moscow. Let's be clear that when I say that part of our hopes is with the international community, it's also a call to action. The international community, especially Europe, has a responsibility right now towards the Georgian freedom movement. And the reason why, and I say this with all the love that I can have for any institution in the world, but the European Union has its share of blame in this. Because for years, the opposition, the pro-European opposition, to which I belong, had been telling the Europeans that this government, led by Bidzina Ivanishvili, was up to no good. And they should never be believed when it claims to be pro-European, and one day it will backstab you. We were saying that for 12 years. We said it when it started arresting political opponents years ago. We said it when it put my party's leader, former President Mikhail Saakashvili, in prison 3 years ago. He's still there. We said it when this government decided to break all diplomatic ties with Ukraine and refused to implement sanctions on Russia. We said it time and time and time again, and the response from so many bureaucrats in Brussels was laughter and was complete disregard for what we were saying. The result of that was that what the European Union should have done years ago, when those actions still mattered, such as sanctioning people, sanctioning Bidzina Ivanishvili, are being considered only now, when it's almost too late. Let's talk for 1 second about Bidzina Ivanishvili. We say all the time that he's a Russian oligarch, and he is. He's a terrible example of a Russian oligarch. But at the end of the day, he is a French citizen. And I am also a French citizen, and I'm ashamed of being a French citizen knowing this. I'm ashamed that my French government refuses to remove his citizenship, even though it has all the legal grounds to do it. Because we might say it's a Russian oligarch that is beating us, that is throwing rubber bullets at us, that is shooting at us in the streets, but at the end of the day, it is a French citizen doing that. And that should have happened years ago. Now the European Commission is considering doing things like removing Georgia's visa-free regime with Europe, which will be a direct punishment, not against Bizinev initially, because he has a French passport, and he'll be able to travel to Paris whenever he wants, and he'll be able to travel to Warsaw, to Berlin, to anywhere he wants in Europe. But who will be punished? Everyone else in Georgia, except him. That is absolutely unacceptable, and I really hope that Europe really comes to its senses, that it's time to do everything that it refused to do over the last 12 years now.
All right, Alexandre Cravo-Asatiani, thank you very much for being with us tonight. As we see, the protests are still massive in Tbilisi. We can watch them live right now. Thank you very much once again for being with us. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to TVP World as more news and more feature are coming up next. Thank you.